mobile networks. That's going to happen in the next 5 years commercially. We are now setting the standards, and that will probably mean that the network itself will become a national defense tool, because network will have capabilities of sensing. It essentially becomes a radar. It can see, analyze, detect things that it cannot today. So this will also mean that the network doesn't only kind of enable operations within the network bubble, but it actually becomes a defensive tool in itself. So these are the long-term opportunities that we do have.
That's fascinating. I mean, just this June, NATO adopted a new 6G standard. I mean, what is it? What is the significance of that?
Well, we are having a process of basically competing about who gets to set the standard for 6G. And obviously the aim is that all the different players in the field, we could agree on a common standard so that all the equipment devices would be then compatible. We are not there yet. The process is ongoing. But it's obviously important that NATO actually in June this year adopted 5G as a military standard. So it means that it basically acknowledged that this is usable, viable for military use.
I want to pick up on something you said earlier about AI, and I'm really interested in hearing it. How do you see AI changing the nature of warfare? And AI, not just ChatGPT, but in the broadest sense. Sauli, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's unavoidable. So that if you think of our pockets, we have mobile phones in our pockets, and they have, let's say, all kind of computer vision and shape recognition. They will kind of pinpoint your friends by name, and they know from every one of your tens of thousands of photos. They know better than yourself, you know, who was who in what given time. So it's something that you cannot really stop the trend. And then I think that there is also quite a lot of talk about autonomous systems, and drones, you know, are still quite a lot of, let's say, remotely controlled in a way that there is an operator, and there are some mishaps with that, so that you know, they are very vulnerable to jamming and what have you. So more autonomous systems can maybe operate when you are losing the connection. So that might be one kind of thing in there. And normally, if you have autonomy, you need to do that through artificial intelligence. Then soldiers typically want to have a human in the loop or on the loop and not off the loop, so that we would like to have a soldier deciding what to do. But I mean, that's also relative, so that now in Ukraine, so they want to design drones that maybe the last 50 to 100 meters are autonomous sliding into the target, you know, when, you know, the jamming is at its strongest. So therefore, you know, I would not like to consider that a black and white question, you know, whether you go for AI or you don't go, but it will start. And for my sake, I think that, you know, this soppatykki in Finnish, I mean, this soup cannon, you know, which is bringing pea soup to soldiers, might also be one of the first ones that should be autonomized, and not maybe the most lethal things. But I mean, if you're very categorized, then you don't want even to have this soup cannon, you know, to drive by itself to front line. But I mean, it's all relative, so you have to start from easiest areas of applications.
Sauli, thanks for the business idea, Nokia autonomous soup cannon.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, we need to IP protect that right now.
That sounds like an excellent idea. Help me put the recent news around drones into context. How worried should we be about this new technology?
Now, the thing what we should be worried about, I think it's the commander of Finnish Defence Forces was also highlighting this in the news earlier this week, that it's the cost imbalance that we have at the moment. So that the threat is caused by relatively inexpensive means. And on the other hand, the countermeasures are done with extremely expensive means. So therefore, if you think of war economy, I mean, this is entirely unsustainable. So we need to learn from, let's say, the use of drones in Ukraine about how you can manufacture in industrial scale something that could counter, let's say, those threats what we see at the moment. And I would highlight that probably we can never put all those counter things on a shelf like we have wanted to do with 155mm artillery grenades. But it might be such a fast-moving target that we just have to start to build capability to meet those things. So therefore, this technical capability would be starting from, let's say, gifted individuals, suitable companies with suitable backgrounds, and training, like being prepared and increased preparedness by creating projects that are doing that to some scale. But what we've seen, for example, in Ukraine is that first, you have objects that are coming very slowly. Then they are putting some jet engines into those things, and they are coming very fast. And first they come so that you can jam them, and then they come, having this fiber optic cable behind them, and you cannot jam them. And it changes a matter of weeks and months. So therefore, we need to just, I think Europe needs to, let's say, just harness the civilian sector, technology sector better to do that. And if you think of, Nokia is hardly a defense company, but it's an excellent example of a dual-use company that all the technologies can be also used for security and defense. Therefore, the companies like Nokia's and even the small startup companies would be the ones that I would opt for, making this change, rather than the present, let's say, missile companies. That if I say that your missile price should go to 1% of the original price, I think that they would not go for it as a good business model. But it has to be 1/100th of the original price at the moment. What we see.
Excellent. Mikko, can you tell us how are you thinking about this and shifting from a company that operates in peacetime to potentially wartime?
Well, basically, Nokia has been in the defense for decades. When the mobile networks and phones came, it kind of was forgotten for some time, but it never went really away. So it's been always there. Like Sauli said, we've been always providing this technology for defense purposes. What is different now is that we see the need for this massive data transfer capacity also in tactical setting in the battlefield. It has to reflect the need for data that you have there. So this is perhaps something new, and this is something that we are currently busy with. I would simply say here in this context that that's what Sauli said. I totally agree with the aspect that instead of trying to figure out what we do need exactly now and produce that, a lot of that, I think it's far more better and far more important actually to really build up a long-term technological capability so that you will be able to address whatever the shape or form of the threat in next 10 years, 20 years is. So there's no fixed solution to this. It has to be a kind of it's a moving target by definition. Then I think in the context of Ukraine, I've been trying to study it hard and being there, trying to understand what is the critical kind of a lesson for us. I think it's not only technological capability, it's actually part of the capability is that how do the companies and Ukrainian armed forces work together? Because the old practice used to be that you have armed forces, you have companies, then you have a massive layer of bureaucracy and process in between those two things. And I think by European standards, the quick process was 7 years. And now you have a completely different situation so that instead of having this kind of insulation between companies and defense forces, they actually have to work together from day one. And they have to make the new iteration, they have to find a new solution, they have to update things in a matter of weeks instead of like having the formal process of years. I think this is going to be quite difficult for Europeans since we don't have the urgency, the absolute urgency of a wartime when you can actually easily kind of throw away all the layers of kind of purchasing rules. So I think we have to learn to be faster, but the critical thing is that armed forces and companies have to be, they actually have to not only collaborate, but actually co-create, because that's the only way of really moving fast enough in this field.
May I comment? I mean, even though we are now talking and having a European viewpoint at the moment, so what we've seen lately in NATO, and most of the European countries are NATO countries, so there are some fabulous new processes in NATO that have been launched very recently, like in June this year. So, for example, Rapid Adaptation Action Plan, RAAP, which means that there are exactly those elements what Mikko was highlighting, that there is a faster route, for the companies to get insight from the defense forces or NATO forces, what the needs would be. There would be also some support for the companies, to recognize companies that startups and tech companies that have something good to give, and faster access to, for example, field testing or other things. And then Finland also declared at the same time in the summer a NATO innovation range, which would be established in Finland, and that is actually highlighting next generation communications. I mean, we're a Nokia country, Nordics are Nokia and Ericsson countries, so next generation communication is very natural technological choice for us, so that no question about it. And also talking about NATO, so Finland is now starting its first NATO Diana accelerator next year. So Diana is a kind of a system that there are more than 2,000 applicants, companies, and that have technical ideas, and they are approaching NATO, and NATO is filtering out 97% of them as waste, and 3% are coming into this program. Now, we have had 4 Finnish companies so far in that NATO system, and next year, let's see how many we are getting. But, it's less than 100 companies annually that are getting a training where military soldiers are telling what they need, investors are telling how you build up your company, and tech people are saying how you should increase your technology readiness level in your thing. So my message for Europe would be that, let's utilize NATO to Europe's advantage, because we mentioned US and something also about, let's say, Far East today. US interest is maybe not in land battle in the same way as in Europe. So if you think of all these, let's say, communication things, drones and other things what we have been discussing today, they are very European issues. So therefore, if we operate within NATO and concentrate our forces in these, let's say, topics that are very relevant to Europe, then we are combining our needs to, let's say, some well-functioning mechanisms. And I don't downplay any European mechanisms, but the European Defence Fund, European UDIS, others, they are not maybe as mature or as impactful as some of these NATO things. In some cases they are.
Mikko, did you have something to add?
Perhaps I would simply take a jump to a more kind of a strategic concern that I have, because I'm actually less concerned of the European capability of handling with the defense tech, and kind of I think we have the industry, we are capable of scaling it up. So we have all those ingredients in place to tackle with the immediate kind of short-term, middle-term threats. I think what is more fundamental is that the reality is that Europe is massively lacking in its digital capabilities. And I'll give an example from my world. The share of the 5G standalone networks in Europe is 2%. And what does 5G standalone mean? It means that the whole network in all its elements is designed for 5G standard, which is the fastest that you can have right now. In China, the role of fully fledged 100% 5G systems is 80%. So in our case, 2%, China 80%. So basically everybody is surpassing Europe in that respect. And this does mean that we simply don't have the digital infrastructure to build an AI-based economy and also defense on it. And how do you ramp this fundamental thing up fast enough? I don't think I have an answer. I think Europeans did wake up on this at least a year ago with the Draghi report. But the fundamental threat here is that unless Europe catches up, it will mean that we will progressively lag behind more and more and more. And why this is important in defense context as well, it's because I think it was one of the pre-events where it was said really clearly, and I think I do agree with that, that technological dominance in the AI world will equal to military dominance. So if we don't have the ingredients, the basic infrastructure to succeed in the AI world, whatever the kind of practical solutions at some point will be, I think we have a massive problem in our hands, and this needs to be addressed. Then everything else can be built upon that.
But what do you mean? Does that mean Europeans building their own large language models, or concretely, what would that mean?
I'll give you an example. It starts from even data center capacity that we have, which is clearly different from for example, US. It also specifically, for me, it means the lack of connectivity. Like I said, Europe, 2% poor 5G systems, China 80%. It may sound like it doesn't matter much, so Chinese will simply get their cat videos faster. But no, it will matter massively. So it's about really the infrastructure. Our problem also in this respect is that we don't have incentives in Europe to really invest heavily. I'll give another example. US operator typically who invest in these networks, they have 100 million subscribers. Average European operator has 4 million subscribers. So talk about scale here.
Sauli, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's a grim picture. I mean, I'm struggling to try to find, let's say, a silver lining, to this thing, and I'm personally very concerned about.
I have solution.
Okay. Well, that's positive, but save it to the later stage. I think one example what VTT has been doing is that, for example, in Finland, the investments in strategic technologies like quantum have been kind of centralized or focused somewhere. VTT is not really kind of holding a quantum computer in its, let's say, basement and holding it for itself. Now, we have had like hundreds of millions of euros of investments into these startups and new companies that are kind of rising. That is a follow-up of the strategic investment. So rather than having, let's say, every town to have 1 qubit computer, so we are having 50 to 300 qubit computers that are central investments. And we have this Lumi computer, supercomputer that we discussed and heard from Commissioner Virkkunen. So that might be something that we have to do more. And it's also painful for smaller nations like Finland to say that, okay, Europe opts for more centralized solutions, because Finland as a marginal, thing in the outskirts normally is not getting everything, by definition. But that's unfortunately, I guess, or fortunately, I guess that's what we have to do. And I mean, going back to the physical world once, if you think of the number of platforms that we have in European, let's say, defense systems, they're like immense. There are tens of different platforms for tanks or aircraft or what have you, compared to US, where there is a consolidation and focus. So therefore, you can make better choices. So I guess Europe needs to pick up its battles. I think the consumer business has gone. I don't know, I'm sorry. But I mean, it could be that, the remaining option could be that if we could manage the data for more tailored or business-driven or sector-specific things, that could be one chance, because there's nobody really collecting wise data about the battlefield. So in Finland, the winters are every year, and we could collect all kind of thing and teach the AI about anything what you can see in the snow and be prepared and what have you. But I don't think we do that much. So therefore, all the data is from consumers, and all the consumer data goes to US and China, and it's not really going to go to Europe in any greater sense. But, I'm trying to find the silver lining in a way that there are some specific areas where we could be much stronger, as a power.
I'd love to hear from both of you. How do we fix this critical infrastructure dependency or problem that we have? How do we make that more sovereign? Mikko?
I think we have to take a look at the European regulation in order to allow for more scale. That means cross-border mergers. That means like allowing companies to grow bigger. Then obviously we need to support R&D pretty massively. And I think we have to, of course, focus on the areas where we still do have a chance. And my kind of a sobering analysis, you can contest that, but we do have only a handful of globally critical companies in Europe left. You have ASML, which is making those basically chips. Then you have Nokia and Ericsson. One of the few examples where also the US is kind of dependent on Europe and not the other way around. Then you have like perhaps Airbus, SAP, things like that. So I think the connectivity is obviously one of those fields where we still do matter more than anywhere else. So I think we have to pick up our battles, like Sauli said, and think meaningfully where we can make a difference. But currently the problem is that, like I said, we need to invest heavily in R&D. We have to allow the market to grow bigger, to invest, to really invest in scale, because otherwise it will lead to a situation where we simply kind of continue to lag behind. We can't scale things up, and it gets more dangerous now when AI supercycle is going on.
Maybe one pass to Mikko again, so that I know that in Finnish media there was one quite recent article by our former CEO Antti Vasara from VTT, Pekka Lundmark, the previous CEO for Nokia, and Peter Sarlin from Silo AI. And they were kind of bringing up an idea that, for example, in next generation communications, it's not only about communications. I'm sure that Nokia would not like to only transfer kind of contaminated messages, contaminated data which is compromised in security and cyber and what have you. And what those guys were saying, those, let's say, 3 leading tech guys in Finland were saying that, you know, when you have this new combination of next generation communications with cyber and AI and quantum and space, you are kind of redefining the place. So it's a bit like a blue ocean strategy, so that, you know, we are maybe behind in many of those things, but we have all the freedom to redefine what would be the future concept of trusted communications. And for me, I'm trying to find a name, whatever, diamond or fireball or rock or whatever that would be, but something that would kind of say that, you know, whatever is going there, it's resilient and it's trusted and it flows and it's shareable and what have you. But that's something I think that, like, my main takeout from, I think it was like 3 weeks ago when this article was, that this could be an option. And companies like Nokia would have the industrial, let's say, muscle also to take it that count. So in that sense, you know, I think that there's always a way forward for us. But we also might need to change the rules of the game sometimes, you know, when we want to play to our advantage.
When you think about AI, I mean, until now, Europe's approach has been very much to focus on the ethical side and make sure it's responsible. Do you think by doing that, Europe has sort of shot itself in the foot?
Yeah, the ethics of AI is something that typically people are very concerned about, you know, what the kind of the autonomous machine is doing, you know, what the computer is doing when it thinks by itself. And let's say 5 years back, it was always about, you know, a car, you know, trying to opt for, you know, by hitting 1 person or 2 persons or what have you. And I think that one thing is that we need to accept that that Europe should be driving regulation for ethical and trustworthy AI as it is doing now. So therefore, you know, the public acceptance of more autonomous systems and the kind of infiltration of AI in all our lives will be somehow manageable. But then there's another ethical question. I don't know if it's a good time to bring that up, but it's also about, you know, when we talk about the ethics of this whole defense thing, you know, what we're doing here, why we are sitting here with Mikko today. And for me, I have been trying to tell to myself that, you know, unfortunately, it's an ethical imperative also that we are sitting here today. So we would maybe not like to be talking about defense issues as much as we do today. But, you know, our, let's say, democracy-based, you know, societies are now under existential threat. So therefore, that's one ethical dimension. That's why we have to do this. And the other ethical dimension is that sometimes, you know, it's better to have a machine helping an elderly person rather than no person at all. And I also learned from one of the Finnish politicians, she might be here today, I don't recall anymore who she was, but was from a kind of a more remote part of Finland. And we're talking about ferry traffic that could be autonomized. And she said that, well, that's a perfect ethical thing, that people can stay longer. They can live out in the islands, you know, they can keep the island inhabited because the cost level of this unmanned system is better than with a manned system. But you have to still do the ethical part, but people can trust that it's safe to ride on those things. I don't know if that answered to you, but
brilliant analysis. I'd like to take some audience questions here. We have Mike, please, could we get one here?
Maybe is this being streamed? Wonderful.
Yes.
So my name is Vili Lehdonvirta. I'm professor of technology policy at Aalto University. So thank you for the very interesting remarks. If Europe cannot develop domestic AI, frontier AI capabilities, should we still adopt AI across society and let it infiltrate into every aspect of society, as you've suggested? Thank you.
yes.
That's a very Finnish answer. Could you elaborate, please?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, you cannot neglect AI because, like what Mika was saying, everything is about data and you know how the data is kind of being a part of our lives, and all the systems will be, let's say, more connected, more let's say cognitive and what have you. So therefore, we have to be good in adapting AI. No question about it. But probably the big, let's say, owners of AI data models and the big servers and what have you, they might be a different ball game. But you know, adapting that, for example, in defense, we can be leaders in that. No question.
So even if that means we are even more dependent on foreign tech.
Just to repeat that for people in the live stream, he asked, even if that means that we're more dependent on foreign tech companies.
Why not thinking of a risk-based approach, so that you know, consider that you make dumb systems in order to avoid your dependency on US, let's say, tech. I would opt for going to wise systems or smart systems, but it's something that you have to kind of consider. You know, if you want to just, you know, for political reasons to let's say reduce your dependency, and at the same time your product range would be dumber, you know, then probably it would not be wise. But it's not a clear balance.
I would say that if we somehow kind of decide not to adopt AI, I propose that we all start to retrain ourselves as museum guides.
Yeah.
Okay, love the questions. We have a lady here in the middle, please.
So I'm Paula Vanninen from University of Helsinki and associate professor. I'm interested about these ethical rules which you were saying. I give you an example that we can create a lot of new drug candidates for the medicines via AI. We get the properties which we want to get the new drugs. And then on the other hand, we can also create a lot of toxic chemicals which can be used, for example, as chemical weapons or perhaps even biological weapons. So how could you rule these, that ethical rules, that can you guide to the computer, supercomputer, that if there is something wrong started to do with somebody, it says, no, we don't do this? Or have you any ideas about this? Because we know that mainly for the military purposes, the aim is to kill people and to protect your own country. But where are these, how to create these ethical rules there? Is it only in the person's minds and the governments, or what? How do you think about it? Is it possible even?
I mean, maybe a dull answer would be that, you know, pretty much all the technologies could be having malicious uses as well. So communication could be, let's say, disinformation or miscommunication and all those. One thing is that if we are, as a mankind, we are winning by harnessing AI into medicines development and all of that. So that has value. So that is saving lives. So maybe you have to, again, a bit balancing like we're discussing earlier on the ethical issues. So it would be quite dangerous to start from a fact that you are, let's say, slowing down or creating, let's say, so much regulation that you are actually slowing down also the positives. So I learned some years back that, for example, in the German automotive some sort of alliance, there was an ethical guideline that it is an ethical imperative to take new technology into use if it has been proven to be safer than existing solutions. which is quite an unorthodox thinking that you have a responsibility and accountability to actually harness AI if you can prove that it actually is having positive impact.
I think I can't claim being any expert on this field, but I would simply assess that obviously when you harness the AI for doing good in the society, you will have the other side of the coin as well. And obviously you can try to regulate that with ethical rules, even legislation. The difficulty here is that because AI is at front and center of the global power competition, so how do you make those powers who want to gain more power and challenge the others, how do you regulate them to stop this kind of weaponizing of the AI? So this is the dilemma where even a democratic rule of law country will be and will have to face. So I think the discussion is going to be like, shall we simply go further? Shall we even weaponize the AI? Shall we plan for how to use it for those kind of purposes with the hope of finding a balance so that nobody can sort of threaten us with this kind of super capabilities because we can then counter. It's pretty much the same dynamics as you had with the nuclear weapons back in the day when actually nobody could really afford of those great powers to stop that. They were rather sort of incentivized to move further. So I'm afraid this might be the logic of the future. I certainly don't hope that, but I think we have to be prepared that something like this will also happen.
Do you think we should have red lines, something that we just won't accept, like autonomous killer robots, for example?
I mean, we can have red lines as many as we please, but the question is that how do we enforce those red lines in the middle of the massive, deep, great power competition? It's not about, it will be about the sort of capabilities. So how do we enforce those? I mean, this is the question we simply can't answer fully, at least.
There's a question over the man with the paper, please.
Yeah, it's a unique identifier. Thank you. Valtteri Vuoriso, University of Tampere. Thank you for the discussion. And Mikko, I think you raised a brilliant point on highlighting the importance and lack of capability in the European infrastructure from a connectivity point of view. Super important. I would like to also highlight energy and the energy infrastructure. Recent report says that if you want to develop an AI factory, a leading AI factory in the world in 2030, it will cost 200 billion, which is, a lot of money, but can be found, but will require the equivalent amounts of energy from 9 nuclear reactors. 9. So all this talk about, where we want to be a European AI superpower, or Finland wants to be an AI superpower, where do we get the energy? Is this futile talk, and are we just trying to deceive ourselves that we are in the game? Or like Vili said, that we should recognize the dependencies on the technology of the great powers. Thank you.
Thank you. Sauli, do you want to take this?
No real answer to that, Valtteri. So I mean, this whole energy debate is something that it looks like, with the amount of renewables, we are actually being able to meet the normal, let's say, requirements when it comes to European targets, if the technology development goes the way how we see it today with nuclear and wind and solar and what have you. But then if that's an exponential increase in energy consumption, that would require some other things. So normally I guess that throughout the history, the more you have had energy, the more you have spent it, so that there's never any excess energy in a way that it's all going to be consumed. So the more we are having it, it will find its way to our systems and processes. So one thing is that at least, we have to try to consider this. I would like to combine this energy question that you might now touch from a sustainability point of view into resilience point of view, so that also, if you are building your energy systems, resilient energy systems would be less dependent on fossil fuels and would be more based on, let's say, renewables or what have you, and therefore that would be one option for that. But if you are running, let's say, your AI server farms with fossil fuels, that doesn't seem very clever either, going forward.
I think if you ask Finnish energy companies, they will give you a slide where they can prove that they can scale up the energy production that will cover those needs. I think on your question, probably we have to also keep in mind that you can calculate things assuming that the energy efficiency stays the same in the future. But what if it improves massively? And just to give an example on 6G, we expect that the energy efficiency will drastically improve in the next 10 years. So you may have things in the horizon that would sort of enable you to cover that as well. So we just don't know that.
And maybe quantum computers someday, depending a bit what kind of time frame we have. So there might be some disruptive ways of computing also in the future, but they are not yet today.
Thank you. Any other questions in the audience? Oh, some pointing over here.
So Peter Watkins from Chatham House. Sauli mentioned new defence and drew the parallel with new space. And I just wondered if you could say how quickly you think this transition might occur. I mean, in space it's happening pretty quickly, but I would suggest that in defence it might be a lot more difficult. There are more and bigger and more influential incumbents. There's all sorts of issues, vested interests and so on. So how quickly might it occur and how might it be accelerated?
Thank you. I mean, excellent introduction to the topic. And those are the kind of things that are actually, let's say, really hindering, this type of thing. Like I said, NATO and many nations have new methods and tools to try to, let's say, attract more companies coming into the market. I would say it takes a long time. And when it comes to space, it's not that massive. I mean, it's been massive for the past maybe 5 years or so, mainly from American companies and let's say really the small companies like we have ICE in Finland. Now they have 800 people and I don't recall how many satellites they have. But it has taken a long, long time for them also to grow. I think it will be the same in defense as well. So one main thing in that new defense is that do we have to kind of channel all the new entrance to the market through existing incumbents? And I think that the existing companies, established defense companies, might be filtering a bit. It might not be in their interest to disrupt their own business, right? If you want to get, let's say, a disruption in cost level, so then you might need to create a challenger. I mean, that's what happened pretty much in the space industry, that you have a different cost level with these new operators. So therefore, they might need to go to the market directly. And then again, we're here with Nokia. I mean, Nokia has, let's say, also products that they can export to defense market directly, not always using a prime or an integrator in between, but of course, in many cases, yes. So I'm just thinking that how can we kind of make it sure that the large industrial primes are not starting to be blockers for new technology introduction, but many times also the administrations that are acquiring new technology, they can also set all kind of rules also what they want to have. They might set a cost level target or let's say availability target or tech target or what have you. So maybe they have some ways of directing this. So no clear answer. I would say that it will take a long time before these small companies are coming. We have been analyzing this Finnish dual use or new defense landscape with like roughly 200 companies. And they are growing much faster than existing companies. Like we had Patria CEO Esa Rautalinko here today. I mean, the growth of these small companies is extensive, but they are starting from near zero. So it will take a long time before they are new Patrias or Airbuses or what have you. Creating a new Airbus will take 20 years, so I think. Even though we have companies like Palantir, those are kind of interesting, but they are exactly the type of companies what Mikko was bringing up that are not from this from this, let's say, continent. But these database companies can come into 10 billion, let's say, range just not overnight, but let's say within a couple of years, but not in Europe.
Thank you, Sauli. We have a couple of minutes left, and I want to give you both a final task. I want to know from you, what is the most important thing Europe can do to future-proof its defense sector? And you both have 30 seconds. Mikko.
Well, I think, like I said, the critical thing is to address those foundational problems that we have in our digital infrastructure and build all those models on that. Unless we do so, any subsequent effort we'll do in defense, in any other field, is quite likely to fail because it doesn't have the foundation to build upon.
Thank you. Sauli?
And I would say that beef up the existing defense industry with dual use or civilian industries. I mean, build those nuclear or polar icebreakers for US, export them from Europe to US, safeguard the whole North Pole with, let's say, European technology, export Nokia stuff in there and try to get as much as possible civilian companies to really also learn how to address the defense market, and not only the defense industrial companies. They know how to do it, but that's where the growth potential is, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much for both for this fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today and tuning in for your brilliant questions, and everyone at the live stream as well. That's the wrap for day one. Thank you.